All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is now 12:02. I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Daniel Callahan. I work with the Communications Unit at the Minnesota Board of Animal Health. Today we will be talking about electronic certificates of veterinary inspection. I knew I was going to stumble on it. They're just eCVIs to me. In any case, that's the subject of our presentation today. Just a few uh, background things before we get started. Your microphones have been muted. There is no chat for this meeting. However, if you have questions, we would invite you to drop them in the Q&A box. There will be time at the conclusion of the presentation to address any and all questions, but I encourage you to put your questions in as you think of them, and we can get them all queued up and ready to go when we hit our question and answer session. Okay, I think that is everything. With that, I will then turn things over to Dr. Katie Cornille and Avrey Bergum. Dr. Cornille?
Hello, hello. Yeah, I'm Dr. Katie Cornille. I'm a senior veterinarian at the Minnesota Board of Animal Health, and I oversee the cattle disease programs, animal disease traceability programs, and livestock concentration points programs. Co-presenting with me, if you want to give a wave, Avrey, is Avrey Bergum. She's my program administrator that helps keep the cattle programs and animal disease traceability programs running. So she's really an expert on this stuff, and it's going to help me get into the nitty gritty. So for those of you that haven't, worked with the Minnesota Board of Animal Health much, our little state agency our mission is to protect the health of the state's domestic animals. We do that through education, cooperation with veterinarians, producers, owners, other stakeholders. And I just want to start out by thanking you all as veterinarians for your role in helping us protect the health of domestic animals. So the CVIs you write, they help prevent disease spread by making sure no animals with obvious clinical signs of disease are moving and exposing other animals. And those documents provide valuable movement data that we can utilize in disease and that we do utilize in disease investigation, so we can do our job of minimizing the impact of outbreaks. All right, I'm going to go camera off so you can just focus on my slides and then what we're going to talk about today. So hopefully it's helpful content for you all. We're going to talk about this transition that we're doing kind of in line with other states of transitioning from paper to electronic CVIs. So when and why that's happening. We're also going to review, in case you haven't had your accreditation training or refreshed on that for a while, the requirements around CVIs. We're going to go over what no-cost options there are. And also, a little bit about how to work with private vendors. We'll also go over how to use addendums to CVIs for, large groups of animals and whatnot, as well as give you a little behind the scenes peek on what compliance looks like around completion of CVIs. We're also going to do, go over some of the questions we frequently get, and then we know a lot of people have had questions, so we're going to try and leave ample time at the end to address all your questions that may come up with this. So here's just a visual timeline of how we're phasing out paper CVIs. So, if you're someone that's been using them for a while, you may have noticed that in January of 2025, we stopped distributing paper CVIs. Starting January of 2026, we will no longer be accepting paper CVIs for exports. So that's from Minnesota veterinarians. And something a little more progressive we're doing to kind of work with other and regional states in meeting these goals of going toward more electronic documentation is we will no longer be accepting paper CVIs for imports starting in July of 2026. So why the change? It is a transition and it's a change away from paper, which, I personally, I like my paper planner. Sometimes I like writing things by hand. But a lot of it does come down to, we are working for the taxpayers, and I kind of view it as our money is your money and I want to use it wisely. And we get thousands of CVIs weekly. And in Minnesota, we aren't able to legally charge for paper CVIs. So when we were distributing those, we were, eating that cost of having them printed and shipping them. And that, was costing thousands of dollars. And not only do they physically cost money, but the personnel hours that goes in, about 2/3 of our agency's budget goes to personnel, and for our traceability staff that are processing these, it takes, at least 10 times more physical time and therefore personnel dollars to do the paper ones. And because as opposed to having it automatically populated in our system, they have to just transcribe everything on those CVIs one by one. And, I don't know about you guys, but I have stereotypical veterinarian handwriting, and I feel so bad for them having to read all those 15-digit numbers and, illegibly scanned paper CVI. So it really is incredibly less efficient. And the main reason for this change is traceability. And traceability for me is about helping me help you as fast as I can, and help producers and help animal owners as fast as I can. Sorry, I use producers a lot because I mostly work in the cattle field, so don't want to leave our companion animal folks out. But traceability is the ability to help me help you all prevent disease spread and reduce the impacts of outbreaks. So electronic CVIs are way more accurate. There are fewer transcription errors trying to read that veterinarian handwriting. And then in terms of efficiency, we get that movement data immediately. And instead of leafing through thousands of documents and file cabinets, we're able to use a search within our system and get that information readily, so we can, contact the people who may be affected as soon as possible. I do have a little bit of a breakdown for our fiscal year 24, which is for the state, July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, of electronic and paper CVI usage by species. You'll see it really, really varies by species. And we're finally, we're getting over the 50%, and as of this last fiscal year, over 60% for electronic usage. But thinking of the thousands and thousands of CVIs that we do, there's a lot that are still paper, and a lot of that is on those export CVIs. So a refresher on what's required when you're filling out a CVI. So this can only be completed by an accredited veterinarian, so make sure to keep up on your accreditation, CE and whatnot. Note to yourself whether you are category 1 or category 2. Category 1 is going to have limits on what species you can do CVIs for. Category 2 is all animals. So, and note that, signing a CVI, and I'll probably reiterate this a few times, is an accredited duty. So, maintaining that status relies on performing those duties as required by state and federal law. So like I said, this completion, it's kind of a dual jurisdiction activity. So there's, in the Code of Federal Regulations, there's requirements around these documents and interstate movements. And then also by state, there's different requirements. We here in Minnesota are very fortunate to work very closely with our USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, veterinary services partners. And so we're able to, work to tackle these things together. A reminder that it can only be signed and issued by the veterinarian that physically inspected the animals. The vaccinations, if there are any required to be listed on there, can be administered by another person. But only the veterinarian that inspected the animals should be signing it. Oftentimes we'll see clinic staff assisting in filling out the information on it. That is totally fine. But just know that, as the veterinarian signing it, you're the one that ends up being liable for that document being filled out correctly. So I just want to remind people that, to take this duty seriously and not to take shortcuts, because any of that incorrect, information, then we'll have to, correct. Another kind of basics is just a reminder of some of the timelines. So it should be issued or signed within 10 days of the animals being inspected. So, let's say your, client came in and they had a routine checkup, but then, 7 days later, they're saying, oh, we'd actually like to go on a trip to Florida. Can you sign a CVI? Yeah, if it's been within 10 days, you can still do that. However, usually the signing of it happens kind of at the time of inspection. And there's like one, kind of exception with regular health maintenance programs. But if you're involved in that, you probably already know about it. It's also important when you're issuing a CVI to verify the import or movement requirements for where the animals are going. Everything always depends on the destination. For livestock species, I recommend interstatelivestock.com. States are pretty good about maintaining those requirements on there. If you're not sure, just call the destination state, kind of Board of Animal Health equivalent. To make sure you know what tests are required to be listed, if official ID is required to be listed, and if there are any special statements or anything like that. So the destination is, we can't help here about, knowing what, South Dakota or something will or won't, accept. Again, the reminder that, yeah, it's an official form. You have to use an official form, can't just write it on a napkin. There are forms that are, and private vendors and whatnot that are allowed for CVIs that have to be approved. So hopefully, it can't just be any old document. And I think Avrey will get more specific into the completion of some of those fields. But I'll reiterate that the addresses on there, remember we're using this for, even though it's a health document, they're often used for traceability situations. So having the addresses be correct to where the animals physically went is super important to us. So I'm going to turn it over to Avrey now.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I should be taking control here now. Yeah, so this slide kind of reiterates a lot of what Katie had just mentioned. So as you know, some fields on the CVI depend on the species and their specific requirements. On every CVI sent to us, both the origin and destination addresses of where the animals were actually located are required. So please don't just put in a business office unless that's where the animals actually were. It's really important for animal disease traceability that we can track where the animals were physically located, like Katie mentioned. The consignor and consignee addresses can be different from the origin and destination, so that's where you could list a business if that was applicable. Other required fields depend on the species and are similar to what was required on paper forms. So you'll need the animal description, identification numbers when required, vaccine product names, dates of administration, next due dates, dates and results of any required tests, and a statement of health saying the animal is fit to travel and is free of infectious, contagious, or communicable diseases. You'll also need the veterinarian's information, including their signature, printed name, license, and accreditation numbers, and their contact information. So all things that you are already putting on paper CVIs. On the Minnesota eCVI PDF, required fields will show up in red on the form. So once you fill out the field, the red will go away. Other eCVI platforms may have different ways of showing which fields are required, but they should be the same amongst different eCVI platforms. And finally, always check with the importing state, like Katie said, to see if they require any additional fields based on their own regulations. Okay, so this slide has a lot of information because it's probably the one that I know the most about here. So there are currently 2 no-cost eCVI options available for Minnesota veterinarians. One of those is the Minnesota PDF eCVI, which we manage here at the Board of Animal Health. This option can only be used by Minnesota accredited veterinarians for animals that have an origin address in Minnesota. Because it runs through Adobe Acrobat, its long-term availability will depend on Adobe continuing to support the format, unfortunately. And then for technical support, we first recommend checking our user guide. It walks through the setup, filling out of the form step by step, and the most common questions we get are already answered there. The guide is posted on the eCVI webpage on our Board of Animal Health website, or you can email us for a copy and we'd be happy to send that to you. If you still need help, our Trace email and our import permit line staff, including myself, can assist with troubleshooting. Just please note we're not Adobe specialists, so for any unusual technical issues, we may have to refer you to Adobe support, unfortunately. So to go about requesting a copy of the Minnesota eCVI PDF, you'll need to complete a user agreement form. You can either email us at trace@state.mn.us to request one, or you can download it from our website. In either case, make sure to download the form before you start filling it out. Otherwise, features like the digital signature may not work. That's probably one of the most reported errors that that people contact us about, is the signature is not working. And most of the time, that's just because you didn't start filling it out from your download. Same thing with the eCVI PDF. Always download it before beginning to fill it out. If you just begin filling it out directly after opening it from the email, it's just a preview of the document, so it has limited functionality. This will also resolve the issue you may get when you first open the document that says, please wait, instead of properly showing the contents of the PDF. If you open your actual downloaded copy, it should work. Now I'm going to go over a couple tips and tricks for commonly asked questions that we get on the eCVI PDF. This is not an extensive review of how to fill out the form. Our webpage has additional resources, including the user guide, like I mentioned, and we also have video tutorials on creating templates, animal lists, digital signatures, and submission. So just to begin, we do recommend saving a blank copy of the eCVI somewhere like your desktop or a folder. Each time you use it, click Save As and then give it a new file name, because if you overwrite the same copy too many times, it can eventually corrupt the form and it won't work properly. But we can always send you a new version if need be, so just reach out to us about that. One really handy feature of this form is that you can create templates. For example, you can fill out the veterinarian certification section for each vet in your clinic, just leaving the date blank. Once it's filled out, you can save the file with a unique name, like the veterinarian's name. This can become your template. Then when you need to issue a new certificate, just open that template, finish filling out the remaining information, and then you save as again to create a new file. That way your original template stays unchanged and you can use it again. There's more information on how to do this in the user guide. So when entering animal information, list only one animal per line. If you're using an addendum, note that you're using an addendum in the first animal line by entering the total number of animals, the species, and typing C addendum in the other official ID field. Also remember to select either the large animal button or the small animal button in the upper right-hand corner, because it will affect what species show up in the drop-down of the species line there. So for signing, make sure to click the signature box after completing the form and all the red fields are gone. If you cancel the digital signature pop-up that shows up, a CVI number may still populate in the upper right-hand corner. But if you hit cancel, it will not, you won't have signed it properly, but it might look like you did. One way to know if this happened is your form will probably still be editable. Another telltale sign that you didn't sign it correctly is in the lower right-hand corner. It'll say certificate not official until signed. And then the CVI number may not be populated. It might have a dash null in the corner on the upper right, like the screenshot in the slide that I'm showing right now. So then to submit, you'll hit the submit by email button or attach the saved file to an email and you can send it to us that way. So there's two different ways you can go about that. And then one thing I do wanted to mention is that even after you sign and all of the fields are locked, the entry permit field and the shipment date will remain unlocked, so you can always add those things in later. And then one handy thing about this form is it works offline, so you can fill it out without Wi-Fi, and you can even sign it without Wi-Fi and then send it to us when you're back online. If a paper copy is needed immediately, a Bluetooth printer can be helpful for that, because then you can do that whole process offline and then just submit it when you're back online. For Mac users, please be aware that PDFs may automatically open in a preview or web browser instead of Adobe. So those don't support fillable fields or digital signatures quite the same way as PC. So to avoid issues, download the file and open it directly in Adobe Acrobat. And you can also reach out to us if you're having any additional issues with Mac, and we can try to help troubleshoot with that. I don't have a Mac computer, so it's a little trickier to investigate what's going on, but I'm definitely willing to help as needed with that. Okay, and then the second eCVI that is no cost is going to be the Veterinary Services Process, or VSPS. This is managed by the USDA. This eCVI is only for level 2 accredited veterinarians, and it does not have an option for companion animals. That's why it's only for level 2. So there's no option for cats or dogs or anything like that at this time. I'm not sure if they have any plans in the works to edit this as more states are moving towards eCVIs instead of paper. I would hope so. But if you're interested in checking out this option, I would recommend going to the USDA APHIS website and getting more information on this from them. All right. And then, so the National Association of State Animal Health Officials, or NASAHO, has developed a process to review the eCVI options offered by different vendors. The goal of this process is to give accredited veterinarians and state animal health officials confidence that eCVI from each provider follows national standards for issuing interstate CVIs and transmitting electronic data. Approved options are listed on our website and on the USAHA website, and both lists are updated regularly. Since the vendors are private businesses, they each can charge their own fees, and they each offer different features or services that may fit well with your business practices. So it doesn't hurt to explore different options just to see what you like best. Over time, I would expect this list to grow, and existing options will continue to improve as many states are adopting this switch. Like I mentioned, the demand is increasing for eCVIs. So I know I mentioned addendums a little bit earlier. So when preparing animals for export, you can include an addendum along with the CVI. Addendums are especially helpful when you're exporting a large number of animals, as they provide extra space to record detailed information like official ID numbers, breed, age, sex, individual test or vaccination records, etc. The CVI must clearly indicate that an addendum is included, so you'll have to write that on the CVI like I mentioned before, and then the addendum must also list the CVI number so that we're able to easily match those two together. The names and addresses of both the consignor and consignee, origin and destination details, the CVI's issue date, and the veterinarian's information are also required on that addendum. Once completed, the addendum should be emailed as a spreadsheet, so Excel, CSV, or another spreadsheet format, to trace@state.mn.us, so where the CVIs are normally sent to us. A template is available on our website to make completing addendums easier. So here on this slide, I have where you can find the addendum template on our website. So it's under the import regulations page, and then it's off to the right-hand side. I have a little arrow pointing there if you can see that. And then to the right is an example of the template itself. So using this template just makes it easier to complete all required fields, and any additional information about the movement you can just add on that right-hand side in those blue cells, you can add just free text over there. So this just helps your addendum so that we can process it quickly and everything is on there that we need. So yeah, you can use a different format if you want, but this is just there for your convenience. And then with that, I will pass it back to Katie with CVI compliance.
Thank you so much, Avery. Yeah, you guys are stuck with me again. So like I had said in the agenda, I do just want to go over, what, happens on our end when, we get CVIs that are missing or have incorrect information. So again, it gets a little wonky because it is a state, federal, both kind of jurisdiction issue. So when we process CVIs, if there's information missing or something is filled out incorrectly, or let's say the destination is a PO box, and I know that, no animals definitely were not physically located in the PO box, but they're marked as non-compliant in our system. So, and we have kind of a routine schedule of sending out to veterinarians a report of any issues they may have had. So you would receive an email that would include kind of a zip file that includes the CVIs that had errors, and it will explain to you what the errors are. It will also note to you whether there are ever, whether there are corrective actions that need to happen, whether it's just like oh, hey, make sure to do this correctly next time, or if it's like, oh, hey, you need to give us an appropriate new address, or we need this vaccination information, or what have you. So, and if you have any questions when you receive those, you can contact us. Note that, repeated issues, if we're finding we have to send, multiple reports to you for the same issues, it will lead to compliance action on our part. And that looks, like warnings and notices explaining that, you're not meeting our requirements, our state regulations for completion of these CVIs. And with it being a dual jurisdiction thing, note that, continued and repeated violations can possibly affect your accreditation status. So I do urge people to, take these documents as serious and important, because they're very useful to us for traceability purposes. If, let's say, there's some extenuating circumstances or something comes up, or you're working with a client whose animals, they're like, oh yeah, they came from out of state, but they didn't come with a CVI, and you want to retroactively write a CVI for them, or just any sort of issues you're having, or if you have a correction you wanted made, just, contact us. It's just helpful to, know ahead of time, and we can put in notes with the CVI in processing how that, issue was addressed and what direction we gave you for how to handle it. So when in doubt, just feel free to contact us, and we always do our best as we can to help troubleshoot in extenuating circumstances. I will also note that, destination states may also contact you if you complete a CVI in a way that doesn't meet their import standards. So hopefully this just gives you a little bit of an idea of we review every single CVI, and it's important that they be accurate. So some frequently asked questions we get, especially around electronic CVIs, is, well, what do I do if the CVI system I'm using is down? If you're using a private vendor, we frankly can't help with that product. You're going to have to utilize their tech support. Sometimes the best you can do in a moment is write down all the information, the required information that needs to be on the CVI, and still send it in a timely manner when system is back up. And again, if there are extenuating circumstances, you can contact our team, give us a heads up, get additional direction. If you're completing something in the field and you don't have Wi-Fi, or there's a Wi-Fi, connectivity issue, note that, you have 10 days to issue it after the inspection, so you can wait till you get back to Wi-Fi. Otherwise, you may want to invest in a product that has offline capabilities, or something like that. Additionally, sometimes some tech issues, you can expand your Wi-Fi range using, additional routers or a mesh network. I'm not a Wi-Fi expert, but there are ways to kind of expand the reliability of your network. And if the owner of the animal needs a immediately printed copy of the CVI, I know Avery had mentioned it's actually can be incredibly useful to have a Bluetooth or wired non-Wi-Fi printer connected to the device you're using to do the CVI, so you can have a copy for whatever reason the person may need it. I am gonna, just because I oversee livestock concentration points, which includes markets. I'm just gonna put my plugs in here because I know markets create a unique situation for a lot of animals moving through very quickly, and how they can prepare for and address eCVI challenges. So, one thing that can help speed things along is incorporating RFID technology, using panel or wand readers that automatically populate into electronic CVIs. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get it going, it's pretty slick. And, I just want to note that like extenuating circumstances will happen, and just, they're frustrating, but contact us, and they should be few and far between. But what I do recommend for market veterinarians is working with the market to set up your systems over the next couple months and now. So when we get to that January time frame of the switch, that those kinks are worked out. And, in terms of having an offline backup, you can use the Minnesota ePDF one as a backup, or have, a non-Wi-Fi printer to print for truckers and whatnot. And, start getting that set up with the markets now. And if you don't know where to begin, because it is very daunting and kind of a big switch, it's a big transition. So you can contact your field inspector or myself if you don't know where to start, so we can kind of get on track and get all the kinks worked out before that January 1st, 2026 deadline. So like we said, we wanted to leave ample room for questions, because a lot of times that's, how we know what people most want to know. So I'm going to start looking at that Q&A bubble. I really appreciate everyone that was visiting here, and I'm gonna open that up and start answering your questions. I see Dan had also put some of the links that were in our slides in that Q&A session, so I really appreciate that, so you guys can address, you can reference those. I will note that this webinar will also be posted on the eCVI portion of our website, so that it can be, reviewed by people that weren't able to be here today, or if you want to go back and listen to a part for fun on some other lunch break.
All right, thank you, Dr. Cornille. Thank you, Avery. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A here at the moment. If y'all are ready to take some questions, first from Dr. Nelly. I work for a rescue. If I'm filling this out for an animal in foster, should the foster's address be the origin address or the rescue's?
The foster's address should be the origin. If that's where the animal's physically located, that should be the origin address if that's where it's moving from. The rescue could, if they're the consignor, then the rescue's information could be in that consignor section, but definitely use the location where the animals are and not the business address.
Good to go. Thank you. Next question. On the addendum template, where do you recommend entering the CVI number, name and address of a cosigner or cosignee, issue date, and vet info?
Yeah, so oh, sorry, what was that, Dan?
Oh, there's a few backup questions. Go ahead, please.
Oh, so yeah, you can put that information on the side column that I mentioned that was like colored blue, and you can name the file it does help if you name the file with the CVI number or some other identifiers that match the CVI, just so it's easier for visual pairing with the CVI and the addendum. But we just want to make sure that that's on there somewhere. So yeah, I guess either way, but as long as it's on the CVI somewhere that we can find it.
Okay.
I am advancing the slide so you all can see our contact information for me, for Avery, and then our traceability inbox. And our cattle import line is also kind of our general traceability phone line, but I want to leave this contact information up for you guys to take down while anyone else thinks of any questions.
Yeah, we have a few more questions here already in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for submitting your questions. Love to see lots of questions. All right, from Miranda, do the independent CVI vendors, I imagine, email the CVI to the board automatically?
I'll let Avery add on to this, but I'll first say just like, yes, the private vendors, it's usually pretty kind of set up in a slick, automated way.
Yeah, when you sign the document, I'm pretty sure they all submit to us automatically. Like I know, for example, Global VetLink does and Vet Century. I haven't heard of any that don't automatically submit to us. The PDF though, you will have to submit manually.
All right, next question. What happens when a state wants a paper CVI? For example, I recently wrote a CVI in April for goats going to Montana, and they insisted on a paper one.
I'm trying to think if I've heard of that specific situation. That's unique, especially Montana is actually very far ahead in their eCVI usage. They're near 100%. But that's in a situation where I would contact us for that, extenuating circumstance, because I haven't really seen that happen any other times of having that be a requirement. But that would be one of those, reach out to us and double check with the destination state.
And you can print off eCVIs, so I don't know if that, like, if they want it handwritten specifically, or if it can just be like a printed copy. You can print and send the eCVI printed out.
Yeah, and if you print it out, you can maybe add a wet signature if that's what they're looking for.
All right, next question. Do the owners need a printed copy of the CVI, or can we just email them a copy for their travels? Specifically asking about equine.
Not necessarily. Sometimes, note certain airlines and whatnot will have requirements. So specifically for travel, depending on the mode of travel, there actually might be private industry requirements around having animal health papers. So I'm rereading the question. They don't necessarily need a printed copy. So that's not a standard expectation.
Question here from John. Does the receiving state confirm acceptance and receipt of an eCVI?
They do not. So when you send the eCVI to us, we send it to our system, which is called CVI Central, and then that will automatically get sent to the other state. So you won't have to do anything with that. But they don't confirm that they received it. I think that would just they would just have way too many to go through and confirm every time they would receive a CVI from a different state.
Question from Jamie in Kansas. We are seeing increasing issues with the PDF eCVIs due to lack of support from Adobe. Here in Kansas, we plan to discontinue the use of these PDFs in 2026. Have you folks seen this issue as well?
End of last year, we had a bit of an issue with this with a Adobe update and had to change some of the, back-end XML formatting. on it. So we're going to continue, using and offering that as long as we are able. But that is why Avery kind of gave the caveat of, if at some point eventually Adobe no longer supports it, we don't really have the ability to offer it anymore, but we're going to continue offering it as long as able. And, we hope to see additional eCVI and potentially, or no cost ECI options in the future as this becomes more mainstream.
Kathy asks if information is missing from a red field, will the system allow it to be processed?
I think it depends on what field is missing, because there's certain fields that I don't think it will let you sign it without having the red field go away. But I know like there's a field on there that's red that says business name. That's not something that's required by us as long as like the owner's name is on there. So I think it depends on the field, and it will flag you if it won't allow it to be processed.
Okay. Kenzie is asking, are CVIs written through the NASAHO approved vendors accepted by all states? Or where is a good place to figure out if a state accepts CVI from a specific vendor?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So an interesting thing about CVIs is that there are, federal standards, but then it is also on a state by state basis. So technically a state can choose to accept or not accept whatever they want. Interstate livestock, if you go through the little, decision tree, you do get to a point where you can, click and see approved eCVI vendors. Otherwise, the best option is to, contact that state if you're maybe using a more new or niche vendor and aren't sure about it. But yeah, that's dependent on the destination state, but I think most states try and accept as many as they can.
And I know, for example, there are some states that don't view our PDF as electronic. So in that circumstance, you would want to make sure you're checking with, or you always want to make sure you're checking with the importing state on if they accept the form of CVI you're writing. So the PDF to us in our eyes will be viewed as electronic, but you'll just want to make sure you're also meeting the import requirements for the other state. So if they're requiring an electronic CVI like we are, you might have to go with a different option.
All right, and the last question I have here in the queue at the moment is from Stephanie. I only do a few CVIs a year, so I typically use the VSPS system. Is there anything wrong with that?
Absolutely not. And I would say, especially if you're only doing a few a year, so you maybe don't have as many, specific needs like offline or certain capabilities, definitely go with, that no cost option. No problem there.
Awesome. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us today and also who submitted a question to keep our discussion lively here. Just wanted to plug for a moment our social media channels for any future webinars or information that we will be sending out regarding eCVIs. You can check those pages both on LinkedIn and Facebook. This webinar, as I said earlier, is recorded or is being recorded and will be available on the board's YouTube channel, along with lots of other interesting webinars, particularly related to companion animals. And any future webinars will also be recorded and posted there as well. I dropped those links into the Q&A for folks to grab them there. If you have other questions after the presentation, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Cornille and Avrey, specifically individually or collectively, or to use the Trace inbox as well, or via phone. All that contact information is currently available on the screen and on our website. Last call for questions. Going once, going twice, pause for dramatic effect. Sounds like we are done. In the interest of respecting your time, we'll go ahead and wrap up for the day. Any closing comments, Dr. Cornille?
No, just thank you all for being here and for all the work you do as a veterinarian.
Well, there we go. Got a question come in last second. We'll take this last one. You said that CVIs must be submitted within 10 days of inspection. I am a South Dakota and Minnesota accredited vet. I thought CVI could be written within 30 days of inspection.
So once issued, the CVI is good for 30 days. So in terms of when the movement happens, the timeline's a little bit confusing. So the inspection and issuing needs to happen within 10 days. And in terms of the movement of the actual animals needs to be within 30 days. So that's to help you, kind of schedule when to have that appointment with your client, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Cornille. Again, if you have other questions or concerns after the presentation, please feel free to reach out. We are here to help. And with that, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful day.